The Scottsdale evening air was thick with the scent of jasmine and expensive perfume, but all I could smell was the ozone tang of a coming storm. I stood in the shadows of the Aura Systems gala watching the stage. My stepsister Brianna was glowing under the spotlight, clutching the Crystal Award for the Eco Villa design. My design. The proprietary algorithm I had written 3 years ago in a basement apartment. She smiled that practice camera-ready smile and pointed to the back of the room right at me. She laughed into the microphone and said, "And I have to thank Natalie, our family assistant, for always keeping my coffee warm while the geniuses work." The room erupted in polite, wealthy laughter. My mother Lisa beamed. My stepfather David clapped harder than anyone. Beside me, Sean, the regional director of the company they didn't know I owned, leaned in close. His voice was a low growl. "Do I fire her now, or do we wait?" I checked the time on my phone. The kill switch was set for 8:30. "Wait for the cake," I said. Before we watch this house of cards collapse, drop a comment below. Have you ever had someone take credit for your hard work while you stayed silent? I want to hear your story. To understand why I stood there and let them mock me, you have to understand the architecture of my childhood. Most people look back on a toxic upbringing and see a tragedy. I look back and see a bad investment. I was 10 years old when my mother married David, and I learned very quickly that affection in this house wasn't a renewable resource. It was a transaction, and I was always overdrawn. While Brianna got the private tutors and the brand new Audi for her 16th birthday, I got the chores and the student debt. They didn't treat me like a daughter. They treated me like an overhead cost they were trying to minimize. For years, I tried to figure out why. I tried to audit my own behavior, wondering what I had done to deserve the exclusion. But then I realized the truth. And it wasn't about me being inadequate. It was about structural necessity. You see, there is a specific mechanics to cruelty. Psychologists call it the scapegoat mechanism, but in architectural terms, I was the load-bearing wall for their fragile egos. For David and Lisa to feel like aristocrats, they needed a peasant. For Brianna to feel like a genius, she needed someone to be the failure. My suppression wasn't an accident. It was the foundation of their entire identity. If I succeeded, their narrative collapsed. They didn't just want me to fail, they required it. That realization didn't break me. It liberated me. It turned my pain into data. I stopped trying to earn their love and started trying to secure my assets. You see, when my biological father passed, he left me a substantial inheritance, a property and a trust. David, as the trustee, was supposed to manage it for my future. Instead, he managed it right into his own pockets. I watched the statements disappear. I saw the vacations I wasn't invited to paid for with money that was supposed to be my safety net. So I went underground. I didn't leave. I didn't fight. I became the gray rock. I got a job as a lowly drafter at a firm. David did business with keeping my head down, fetching coffee, playing the part of the dull, unimaginative stepdaughter. But at night, I was building Aura Systems. I built it under a pseudonym, creating smart home algorithms that revolutionized the industry. I bought the firm that employed me. I bought the firm that employed Brianna. I became the silent majority shareholder of the very world they were so desperate to conquer. I spent 5 years building a glass castle around them, and they were too busy looking in the mirror to notice they were standing in my living room. They thought I was the help. They didn't know I was the landlord. And tonight the lease was up. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when I found the smoking gun. I wasn't sleeping. I rarely slept in that house. I was in the guest room, the one they claimed was mine, but used for storage, monitoring the Aura Systems server logs on my tablet. I saw the spike in data transfer. Someone was downloading the entire source code for the EcoVilla project. I traced the IP address. It wasn't a hacker in a basement halfway across the world. It was coming from the master suite down the hall. User ID, Brianna. I didn't gasp. I didn't storm down the hallway to confront her. I just sat there in the blue glow of the screen, and I felt a strange, heavy weight lift off my chest. For the first time in my life, the confusion was gone. There is a story about how they train baby elephants. They tie them to a stake with a heavy chain. The baby pulls and pulls, but it isn't strong enough to break it. Eventually, it stops trying. It learns that the struggle is useless. When that elephant grows up, it becomes a massive creature capable of tearing trees out of the ground, but the trainer can still hold it with a thin, flimsy rope. The elephant doesn't break free because it believes the rope is stronger than it is. It stays captive not because of physics, but because of memory. That night, looking at the server logs, I looked at the rope around my ankle. It was made of my desire for them to love me. It was made of my hope that if I just worked hard enough, if I was just useful enough, they would finally see me. And in that moment of cold digital clarity, I realized the rope wasn't tied to anything. I wasn't the baby elephant anymore. I was the one holding up the roof. I didn't need their permission to leave. I just needed to walk away. But I wasn't going to just walk away. I was going to take the circus down with me. I opened the command terminal. I didn't block the download. I let her take it. I let her steal every gigabyte of my hard work. But I attached a writer to the code, a hidden subroutine buried deep in the rendering engine. A kill switch. I programmed it to trigger on a specific date at a specific time when the system detected a live presentation mode. I set the timer for tonight. I closed the laptop, laid my head on the pillow, and slept the sleep of the dead. The daughter was gone. The architect had taken over. Fast forward to the gala. The ballroom was silent as Brianna tapped the screen to unveil the virtual walkthrough. The massive LED wall behind her flickered. The beautiful, sustainable villa she had been bragging about for 20 minutes didn't appear. Instead, the screen dissolved into static. A red error box 10 feet high flashed onto the wall. Critical failure. Unauthorized access. Stolen asset detected. The room went deadly quiet. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Brianna tapped the tablet frantically, her smile twitching into a rictus of panic. Just a technical glitch, she stammered into the microphone, her voice cracking. One moment. She looked at me. Her eyes weren't pleading. They were furious. She rebooted. The same message appeared larger this time. The investors in the front row started whispering. The murmurs grew into a rumble of confusion and amusement. I watched Sean check his phone. He gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. The kill switch had done more than just crash the presentation. It had auto-emailed the metadata history to every board member's inbox, showing the original author of the code, me. I slipped out the side exit just as my stepfather David grabbed my arm. His grip was hard, painful. He dragged me into the service corridor, my mother Lisa right behind him. I expected questions. I expected them to ask what happened. I was naive. Fix it, David hissed, his face purple with rage. Get in there and fix the computer. You did this. You corrupted her file because you're jealous. You are ruining her night, Lisa spat, her voice trembling with the indignation of a woman watching her social status evaporate. Do you have any idea how much this party cost? Go out there and tell them it was your mistake. Tell them you uploaded the wrong version. They didn't ask if I wrote it. They didn't care that Brianna had stolen it. They only cared that the illusion was breaking. They looked at me and saw a mechanic they could order, around a prop they could blame. I can't fix it, I said, my voice steady, my pulse resting at a cool 60 beats per minute. If you don't fix this right now, David threatened, leaning in close, I am cutting you off. You won't see a dime of the trust. You won't have a roof over your head. I will destroy you. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized he was just a man in a rented tuxedo standing on a floor I paid for. Okay, I said. I pulled my arm from his grip and walked away. I didn't go back to the ballroom. I went to my car. I opened my laptop and sent one email. It wasn't to them. It was to the General Counsel of Aura Systems. Subject line, cease and desist. I attached the server logs, the timestamps, and the proof of intellectual property theft. I formally authorized the lawsuit against Brianna Miller for corporate espionage and theft of proprietary assets. I sent it not as their stepdaughter but as the majority shareholder. They thought the night was a disaster. They had no idea it was just the opening statement. The next morning, David didn't come to apologize. He came to negotiate. He showed up at my apartment door at 7 o'clock sharp, wearing a golf polo and the strained expression of a man trying to plug a bursting dam with a wad of cash. He didn't ask to come in. He just walked past me to the kitchen island and slapped a check onto the granite counter. $500,000. It sat there crisp and blue, vibrating with desperation. Take it, he said, his voice rough from lack of sleep. That is $500,000, Natalie. It is more money than you will ever make as a drafter. I want you to sign a statement saying you made a coding error. You admit fault, you resign quietly, and you take this money to start over somewhere else. somewhere far away. I looked at the check. I looked at him. He wasn't offering me a gift, he was buying a scapegoat. He needed someone to bleed so Brianna could stay clean. But as I stared at the numbers, my analytical brain kicked in. I knew David's finances better than he did. I had been tracking the family spending for years as part of my own due diligence. David was leveraged to the hilt. He leased the cars. He mortgaged the summer home. He was liquidity poor and asset heavy. There was absolutely no way he had access to $500,000 in cash on a Sunday morning. Where did this come from, David? I asked, my tone mild. Does it matter? He snapped, adjusting his watch. It clears. That is all you need to know. Sign the papers, Natalie. Don't be stupid. You act like this is a war, but it is just business. I am making you a business offer. I need 24 hours, I lied. He sneered, a look of triumph flashing in his eyes. He thought he had won. He thought everyone had a price, and he had just found mine. You have 12, he said. Bring the signed statement to the Aura offices at 9 a.m. tomorrow. He left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frames. I didn't touch the check. I took a picture of it. Then I called Benjamin. My younger brother was 20 years old, a quiet tech prodigy who lived in the basement and whom the family largely ignored because he wasn't flashy enough for their brand. They didn't know he had been helping me build the Aura infrastructure since he was 16. Ben, I said, when he answered. David just offered me $500,000. I need to know where he got it. Run a credit check. Check the property records. Check everything. On it, Ben said. He didn't ask why. He just typed. I waited by the phone, the silence of the apartment heavy and cold. It took 40 minutes. When Ben called back, his voice sounded hollow. Nat, he said, you aren't going to believe this. Try me. He didn't use his own money, Ben said. He took out a second mortgage. A high-interest, short-term bridge loan. On the main house, I asked. No, Ben said. On the inheritance property. Mom's house. The one held in the trust for you. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My mother had left me a small property in her will, a house David was supposed to hold in trust until I turned 30. It was the only thing I had left of her. That is impossible, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. He can't leverage that property without my signature. I am the beneficiary. I am looking at the loan documents right now, Nat, Ben said. The signature is there. It is dated 3 days ago. He forged your name. He notarized it himself. I hung up the phone. I walked over to the counter and looked at the check again. The nausea vanished, replaced by a cold, crystalline rage. David hadn't just tried to bribe me. He had stolen my own inheritance, my own house, to pay me off. He was trying to buy my silence with money he had embezzled from my future. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It wasn't even a civil lawsuit. This was bank fraud. This was forgery. This was a federal crime. I picked up the check, careful to hold it by the edges. I placed it in a plastic evidence bag. David wanted a business meeting. He wanted to settle this like professionals. Fine. I opened my laptop. I didn't draft a resignation letter. I drafted an agenda for the board meeting. I invited the legal team. I invited security. And then I added one more contact to the invite list. The FBI field office for financial crimes. The foundation wasn't just cracked. It was criminal. And tomorrow morning, I was going to condemn the building. The conference room at Aura Systems was a glass box suspended 20 floors above the desert. From here, the cars on the highway looked like toys, and the people looked like ants. It was a perspective I had grown used to, but for my family it was terrifying. They were seated on the other side of the mahogany table when I arrived. David was wearing his best suit, the navy one he saved, for closing deals he couldn't afford. Lisa was checking her makeup in a compact mirror, nervous energy radiating off her like heat waves. Brianna sat between them, arms crossed, looking bored and annoyed, as if being summoned to a multi-million-dollar corporate headquarters was an inconvenience to her social calendar. They were waiting for the CEO. They were waiting for a stranger they could charm, manipulate, or bully. I watched them through the one-way glass for a moment. It was fascinating in a clinical way to see them in their natural habitat, the space before the performance begins. They were rehearsing their lies. David was straightening his tie, preparing his speech about youthful indiscretions and family loyalty. They had no idea that the walls were closing in. Sean opened the door. He didn't sit. He walked to the head of the table and pulled out the chair. David stood up, flashing a winning, predatory smile. Ah, you must be the legal counsel. We are waiting for the owner. We have a settlement to discuss. Sean didn't speak. He just looked at the open door. I walked in. I wasn't wearing the drafter's cardigan they were used to. I was wearing a tailored suit that cost more than David's car. I walked past them, the silence in the room growing so heavy it felt like it might crack the windows. I stood at the head of the table, placed my hands on the leather chair, and sat down. "Hello, David," I said. The confusion on their faces was a masterpiece of cognitive dissonance. They couldn't process the data. To them, I was an object, a tool, a piece of furniture. Furniture doesn't sit at the head of the table. Natalie Lisa asked, her voice trembling. "What are you doing? Get up. The CEO is coming." "The CEO is here," Sean said, his voice flat and bored. "You are addressing the majority shareholder and founder of Aura Systems." The air left the room. Brianna's mouth fell open. David sank back into his chair, his face turning the color of ash. It wasn't just shock. It was the sudden, violent realignment of their entire universe. I looked at them, and I finally understood the mechanism of their destruction. Psychologists talk about the difference between having and being. My family had spent their entire lives obsessed with having. They had the cars, the clothes, the titles, the address. They believed that if they acquired enough things, it would give them substance. They thought the costume made the actor, but they never worked on being. They had no talent, no integrity, no resilience. They were empty shells painted gold. And the moment I threatened to take away what they had, they realized they were absolutely nothing. Their power wasn't intrinsic. It was rented, and I had just canceled the lease. "This is a lie," Brianna whispered, but her eyes were terrified. "You're a drafter. You fetch coffee." "I built this," I said, gesturing to the skyline. "I built the code you stole. I built the company you work for. And I built the safety net you've been cutting holes in for 20 years. I slid a black folder across the table. It slid effortlessly across the polished wood and stopped in front of David. "Open it." David's hands shook so badly he could barely lift the cover. Inside was a single document. The FBI case number. "I know about the second mortgage, David," I said. "I know you forged my signature to leverage the only thing my mother left me. You tried to pay me off with my own stolen future. I was going to pay it back." David stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "It was a bridge loan. Natalie, please. I did it for us. For the family." "There is no family," I replied. "There is just a fraud, an enabler, and a thief." I turned to Brianna. "You are blacklisted. I have already sent the evidence of your theft to every major architectural firm in the country. You will never work in this industry again. The lawsuit for damages will likely bankrupt you." I looked at Lisa. "And you? You watched them eat me alive for years and asked for seconds. You have 30 days to vacate your home. The bank foreclosed this morning because David missed the payments on the primary mortgage to pay for your gala." "You can't do this," Lisa wailed, grabbing David's arm. "We're your parents." "You were never my parents," I said, standing up. "You were my overhead. And I am liquidating the department." I turned to Sean. "Have security escort them out. If they resist, call the federal agents waiting in the lobby." I didn't watch them leave. I turned my chair toward the window and looked out at the desert. I heard the weeping, the shouting, and finally the heavy thud of the door closing. It was the quietest sound I had ever heard. The collapse of my family wasn't loud, it was administrative. It happened in courtrooms, in legal filings, and in the quiet, devastating hum of a server deleting a user profile. Brianna didn't just lose her job, she lost her future. The architecture world is small, and I made sure her reputation was nuclear. I sent the forensic report of her theft to every major firm on the West Coast. She didn't get fired. She got erased. Last I heard, she was working retail in a strip mall in Mesa, selling knockoff handbags to tourists. She tried to call me once 6 months ago. I didn't block the number, I just let it ring. It was the sound of a ghost trying to haunt a house that had already been demolished. David didn't get a settlement. He got a sentence. The federal prosecutors didn't care about his family loyalty defense. They cared about the forged signature and the bank fraud. He pleaded guilty to avoid a longer trial. He is currently serving 3 years in a minimum security facility in Arizona. He writes me letters, sometimes long, rambling manifestos about how I misunderstood him, about how he was only trying to secure a legacy. I don't open them. I put them directly into the shredder. I don't need his words. I have his numbers, and the math never worked. Lisa was the collateral damage she always feared becoming. With David in prison and the assets seized to pay back the fraud, she was left with nothing. The country club memberships, the galas, the status, it all evaporated. She moved into a small rental apartment downtown. She tells people her daughter abandoned her. She plays the victim perfectly. It is the only role she ever really knew how to play. As for me, I didn't stay in the shadows. I stepped into the light, but on my own terms. I took over as the public CEO of Aura Systems. We launched the Ecovilla project under my name, and it won every award in the industry. But the real victory wasn't the plaque on the wall. It was the dirt under my feet. A week ago, I drove out to the inheritance property, the one my mother left me, the one David tried to steal. It was a beautiful piece of land sitting on a ridge overlooking the valley. The house that stood on it was tainted. It smelled of David's cigars and my mother's silence. It was a monument to a time when I was small and afraid. I didn't renovate it. I didn't try to fix the cracks or paint over the rot. I hired a crew, and I bulldozed it. I stood there in the morning sun wearing my hard hat and boots, watching the excavator tear through the roof. I watched the walls crumble. I watched the dust rise up and drift away on the desert wind. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel nostalgic. I felt efficient. I was clearing the site. I was removing the debris, so construction could begin. Now the lot is empty. It is a flat, clean square of earth ready for a new foundation. I have the blueprints in my truck. It's going to be a modern home full of light and glass and smart systems that I designed myself. It will have no dark corners. It will have no guest rooms for people who don't love me. It will be mine. I finally found peace. It isn't the warm, fuzzy feeling they talk about in movies. It is cooler than that. It is the quiet satisfaction of a balanced ledger. It is the stillness of a room where no one is lying to you. I realize that you can't fix a structure that was built on a sinkhole. You have to tear it down. You have to scrape the earth clean. And only then, when the ground is solid and the air is clear, can you start to build something that will actually stand. I didn't just rebuild a house. I rebuilt my reality. If you're holding on to a relationship just because you share blood, remember, you can't build a castle on a foundation that's trying to collapse you. Share this story if you're ready to break ground on your own life.